everybody. Welcome to Gardens, the Untold Story. I'm your host, Ken Somerville. My co-host and good friend, Andy Lopez, the Invisible Gardener, is with us. And we're talking about transforming your soil with dynamic accumulators. So, Andy, maybe we should tell people, for those that don't understand what a dynamic accumulator plant is, do you want to explain to people, or we can explain together?
I was hoping you would tell me because I don't know what a dynamic accumulator is. I never heard that word, a dynamic accumulator, for in my life. I've been around a long time, and nobody has ever said, "Hey, dynamic accumulator." I mean, I understand weeds, I understand plants, and the word pretty much explains itself. It's a very powerful plant that accumulates minerals, accumulates whatever it is that it accumulates. Not all plants accumulate the same minerals. We all know that there are plants that accumulate iron, there are plants that but to me, we talk about weeds a lot, weeds being Mother Nature's medicine. Well, weeds are dynamic accumulators. Wait, yeah. It's the plants for the soil, right? The weeds are a dynamic accumulator. That's exactly what they do. They pull up from the ground whatever mineral they're genetically geared to pull up. Yeah. That's needed there. We were using, we used dynamic accumulator. There it is in the background. Son of a gun. I was thinking of like a Batman, the dynamic duo, That was
yes, Batman and Robin. But, a lot of people, I know hemp is used a lot in, reclamation projects where they're trying to take poisons out of the soil because they're a good dynamic accumulator. And we talk about, weeds being medicinal plants for the soil because those weeds are actually drawing up different things. So they become a dynamic accumulator that we can use and process and put back into our soil to cover what's missing in our soil. So we can look at them as indicator plants. So the term dynamic accumulator is something, a lot of the regenerative, etc., people are using that terminology. So we can look at it as in many different ways, like the weeds are medicinal plants for the soil and they're a dynamic accumulator, but so is a tomato plant that pulls up specifically, boron into itself to put into its fruit. Right. It's a dynamic accumulator too.
What comes to mind to me are beneficial planting. Beneficial. Yes. When you say what's a beneficial plant that you want to put, a companion planting, right? When you put two plants together, one is actually a beneficial accumulator that will benefit the plant that's next to it, because the other plant probably not very well at bringing dynamic nutrition up where this plant does. That's what beneficial plants are all about. In my opinion, you put something next to each other, and these plants are, by the way, there are many different. So I look at all vegetables, even fruit trees are dynamic accumulators.
Yeah.
They're all accumulators, and some are more able. Some of them basically are weeds because they grow so hardy. Bamboo is a dynamic accumulator. It's a giant weed. Right. And also too is I was looking the other day at banana trees are very heavy accumulators, and you'll find that the plants, the banana leaves can be used because they have iron, calcium, magnesium, a full blend of stuff. Once you dry them up and you whip them together and you put it back on other plants, so you know what I mean. So and for me, when I first learned about accumulators was really when I started gardening in my backyard, because I found that certain plants would like to grow like crazy. I call them volunteers. I didn't plant you, but look at how you're growing. And even where I was at the farm today, there's a whole bunch of plants that are coming up all over on their own. Nobody planted them, but these are like strong things. And in my backyard, there are a couple of plants. And I often debate whether or not, because I want more roots in the soil, right? More roots in the ground. And in my yard, I would love anything that wants to grow there, right? And wants to be dynamic and grow really powerful. They're welcome. But I'm changing my philosophy because some of them are so strong and so powerful. Like for example, let's see, what is it called? What is it called? It's
Comfrey?
well, comfrey is it's right up there. I was thinking of like dandelion, but that's not the one either. It has a yellow flower, and it's a very it's like mustard plants, mustard
Yeah, could be mustard seed. Yeah.
mustard seed, right? Because in my backyard it's full of these mustard plants. They grow
Okay.
really, really intense, and the mustard itself can be used for many different purposes. You can eat the plant. One of the things about beneficial with mustard, it's the same thing with dandelion. A lot of people consider dandelion a weed, right? But it's not
Yeah.
really a weed. It's a perfectly good plant that you can use. Dandelion coffee, the dandelion roots, the dandelion itself. It's got iron, minerals, all kinds of stuff. So it's a
Yeah.
massive. So anything that you consider to be a weed, they're very good at accumulating everything that's in the ground. That's what their job is, to pull from the deep down the ground, pull it up.
Yeah.
And so I started when I started with with my yard, my garden,
Mhm.
and even here now, I still. So what's interesting about the mustard seed, and I learned this quite a few years ago, is the Spanish brought it to California
Okay.
for mustard seeds, right? So this thing right now, I can go out and show you fields and fields and fields, yellow mustard plants. And the interesting side note on that is that the yellow ones are female, and the blue ones are male. You can have one blue male plant
Okay.
in about a million female plants. Okay, so you look at a giant field, they're all yellow. You see the one blue plant, that's the male. Hey, ladies, how we all doing here? Everybody all one and the two, right? Yeah, and that's the male. And one of the
Right.
things I learned about it, they produce a substance in the root that inhibits other plants from growing. There's a name for that. I
Mhm.
forgot now. But that's what they do. They stop other plants from growing in order to ensure their survival.
Well, and that's one of the things that people need to understand. And that's what we were talking companion planting. Obviously, with mustard, you're not going to have a lot of companion plants able to exist with them because they're changing the environment. But, I was mentioning the tomatoes and, oh my God, marigolds, the African marigold actually helps tomatoes grow. It produces substances and it draws up from the soil structure different substances that it shares with the tomato plants and protects the tomato plants. And it's these types of plants, and like your dandelion, the flower, the leaves, and the root, it can all be consumed. And in doing that, like if you have, say, like the mustard seed, Andy, you're talking about all over your yard, and you gather that up and you use that either in your compost, or you're making a fermentation out of it, you can make a concentrate and put that back in the soil. And if your soil is missing those components that you're accumulating through these plants, and you put that back on, you can find that the next season those plants don't grow again because Mother Nature has created that balance again, and they don't need to grow there anymore. And that might be something, Andy. I don't know if you've noticed it in your long-term customers. Have you seen that type of thing happen where that nutrient like calcium or magnesium, etc., has been added back in enough to the point where those other plants don't come up?
Of course, of course. So when I go to a place, it usually has a lot of weeds if they haven't weeded already. Because what happens, they will pull the weeds up. So, you can't really tell. Occasionally I do go to places that nobody does any weeding or all, and you'll see the weeds. And one of my favorite things to do is to take an annual picture of the property, and you'll see less and less of these weeds as long as the minerals and the plants and everything are being done to convert it.
Yeah.
And that's a common thing for me, because when people come to me, one of the biggest problems is how do I control these weeds without
Yeah.
using any chemicals, right? How do I get rid of these weeds, because they're coming up everywhere, And I try to tell them they're not weeds, at a job, and they don't want to hear that. What they want to hear is, what do I have to do besides a chemical weed? And there are organic weed controls too, but they don't really solve the problem. It's just like, for example, corn gluten is organic weed control, and corn gluten inhibits seeds from sprouting. So it only inhibits weeds to sprout, right? To sprout, and not once they're growing, doesn't kill them. But what's interesting too is that one of the things that I look and you see, I've done a lot of stuff, and then I'm realizing what's happening. People are coming up with different names for these things, and I'm going, wait a minute, that sounds very familiar. So cover cropping, crop. Hello, cover. I would say hello, Junior Child's here. But so I was heavy into raised beds and heavy into cover cropping. And what all that cover cropping is planting hyper accumulators.
Yeah.
So the hyper accumulator, I'm just looking at the word right now. It's another one of those words I've never heard of before in my life. Scientists call them hyper accumulators.
Yeah.
And they're really very good at just pulling in. That's because they're basically fantastic weeds, right? They just whoosh and they get in the iron, mineral, all that. And So cover crop, Rudolf Steiner, his main thing, right, was one of the things, right, not main thing, he did a bunch of other things. Oh, okay, yeah, that too. And so, yeah, the dog, is that your dog?
Yeah, that's my puppy dog, yeah.
He knows about Rudolf Steiner and biodynamic farm. But one of the things that the way he gets minerals is from knowing what the accumulator plants are. He discussed these various different plants. He doesn't call them accumulators. He said this plant has iron in it. This plant's got zinc in it. That plant has a blend, right? And this is how you can break it down, because Mother Nature normally, a cow will chew it and eat it and break it down, and then the stomach bacteria will break it down some more. So when it pooped out, it was already in a form that then the soil microbes can take it and break it down some more, right?
Yep.
With goats, he liked animals. Because the animals, and specifically with the type of stomach that he wanted, because the stomach was the arena where all these plants would get broken down.
Where all the biology gathers and breaks it down.
They would get broken down, and they get pooped out, and then we would make compost with that or preparation. So he said, well, let's speed up the process. We're going to take the stomach of a cow, and we're going to take these plants, put it in the stomach of a cow, bury the stomach of the cow, and come back in a few months, and the plant, the microbe, the bacteria, the organisms in the cow will break down the plant to what we want, and then we can use that in a liquid form or put it under other plants. So that's how I didn't really know I was doing accumulator plants but that's what I first learned about gardening through biodynamics.
Yeah,
that was it. That was it. He understood that he didn't call it medicine, but pretty much it is. That's what he was saying, because he said that plant over there is very good at bringing. We want that plant because they got calcium in it. It's a calcium rich plant. Or we want that plant over there because again there's iron in it. He didn't say, well, it pulls it up or any of those things that we hear now. Or I don't think I even heard the word weed in his discussions at all. But he was basically saying that, because you have to say, well, what makes that plant so good at pulling up iron? Or why aren't all the plants doing that, right? Why do all plants pull everything up? And so that was my question too. I always felt, well, if a weed's going to be pulling up iron, why can't this plant pull up iron too? And I don't have the right answer for it, because there's no reason why that plant can't pull up the minerals and trace minerals that it needs, right?
Well, actually, Andy, the simple answer to that would be the genetic code of the plant. And, if it's pulling up iron, its cells are made of that much more iron than, say, the plant next to it that is pulling up more calcium. So it's the genetic code of the plant.
What makes them different? Why are the plants genetically different? Why aren't all?
Is a tomato the same as an apple tree? No, it's a totally different
plant. I hate you. You're so mean.
I know. I'm sorry.
But you're right. That's what makes a difference. That's what makes a difference. An apple tree is different than a banana tree plant.
Yeah.
So it's a genetic makeup of that, but still underlining that shouldn't make any difference if you're a tomato or a cucumber or a peach tree or a rose. They all should be given equal rights to access all this stuff. That's what I've always said, right?
Well, I think they have equal right to it, Andy, but it's all in the makeup of the plant itself. It's like let's turn it to a human being, somebody that has blonde hair compared to someone that has red hair. The different, cell division and pigmentation needs different components, so it needs different things than what the blonde needs to what the redhead needs. So it's the same with our plants and our animals, because each thing is going to be that
So are
little
you
bit
saying
different.
that God screwed up and that basically he made some people wealthier in ability to absorb
Not at
things than
all.
other people?
Not at all. It's just that everybody and everything has its place in nature, just like all the different biology
Well, I've
has its
always had a hard
place.
time with that because that means that there's some plants out there in the world that need other plants, otherwise they're starved because they're not capable of generating the food that they need. And it doesn't really
Well,
make any sense that the wise person up there would say, "Okay, I'm going to create you, but you can't really. You're going to die unless you have somebody else help you."
it's
I've always felt that that's a little bit.
it's back to the predator prey and how our planet was developed. You look at the Venus flytrap, didn't have a way to have the biology truly connect with it to help bring it nutrients. So it actually had to find its another nutrient source, which was the bugs that were flying around, and that was how it got its components for building its cells. In the later stages of development of how our planet developed, the different plants started using different ways in connecting with different biology until now we're up into the fungal and the
Well,
rainforest, which is 2,500 parts fungal to 0 parts bacterial. Back then it was all bacterial, which didn't play well with the plants back in the day, and you had things like the Venus flytrap. So it's a successional evolutionary path that our planet has went on. So each plant had to be in succession to be able to fit into that cycle and use the minerals and nutrients that are in our soil, using it through the biology, coming together to build those specific plants.
just feels like one big experiment.
Oh, I don't doubt we're all an experiment. Look at
That's
my
what
fuzzy face. I gotta be an experiment.
that's what it feels like because I've always thought that everything if you take away the human picture and you'll find the animals and plants and insects pretty much take care of themselves. They provide the food they need. But what it appears to be is that no, there always has to be a few other things around to provide you more of what you need because you can't get it on your own. I know that's the same thing with people. So
Yep.
I guess what happened, but I've always thought it was really perfect to begin with. The Garden of Eden, all plants were getting the nutrition they need, and they didn't need it from anywhere else. Because the recycling system was there to provide them with everything they need.
Yeah.
So it makes a bunch of sense. The only thing is that now what's happening is that uh, we are starting to rely, because basically what accumulated plants are, they're super plants that have not been destroyed by human beings yet. They still have the ability to do their thing. Many other plants have been hybridized so many times. Tomato plants have been hybridized over and over again. All kinds of vegetables and fruit trees. They're not their normal. It's not their normal growing the way they were genetically mutated to a certain degree. So, but I think if we go back to the way it was before we started fooling around, I think everything had the ability to be able to take the food and take the minerals, because Mother Nature did such a good job of recycling that everybody got what they needed,
Well,
basically.
Andy, it comes back to the biology that's in the plant, that's in the seed that is planted. Say, say it's a tomato seed in comparison to, the Venus flytrap seed, the biology that exists inside the seed that sprays out when that seed, pops out as spermolate, I believe is the correct term.
Oh my God.
I know, it's a bad one. But when it shoots out the biology that exists inside that seed, it's specific biology designed to build that plant. And the different plant has a little bit different biology, just like it's got a little bit different DNA. And the biology that exists is going to gather different components that are more needed for that specific plant. And that Dr. Green Thumb says here, ginseng is calcium hungry, whereas my blueberries would die if I fed aquatic calcium. If this is no other reason, it will raise the soil pH. So each specific plant, and this, especially with the trees, each one needs that little bit different concoction to really be truly healthy, where we're putting out a huge amount of different variety, both in the nutrition that we're giving with what we're breaking down to make say a compost tea. What goes in that compost is the building blocks that are going to be supplied from that compost and the biology that goes with those. And we're trying to do a blanket approach, say with cannabis, because a lot of the people on our shows grow medical cannabis as I do, and we try to cover all the bases of everything that's necessary, and because we know that certain plants want more of one thing, so we give more in our compost. We can use that to break things down and make them the more easily for the biology to build those new cells. And some things are going to be used and some things are going to be stored, just like the fungal hyphae in the Ukraine is grabbing those molecules of radioactive material and hiding them in the fungal hyphae. That's a dynamic accumulator. So it's not so much, how do I want to phrase this? Everything can accumulate because in the cell structure itself, all different types of cells need a little bit of different makeup inside of them. Like, Andy, you need that Puerto Rican background built into your cell. You need that cha-cha-cha girl in there. Okay. Yeah. So it's what I really want to point out to people is we can look at those medical plants, those weeds, medicinal plants for our soils. We can use those as an accumulation of what's necessary or what Mother Nature is saying is necessary. And we can process that like through compost or however you want to do it and put that back in to give those specific building blocks to say that comfrey plant. So if we take the excess comfrey, we process it, put it back into next year's comfrey, those building blocks are so much easier to use and for the plant to grab. You were talking cover crops, Andy. That's a perfect example of using an accumulation of what is needed to grow that plant to put back in for your next crop that you are growing in that area.
What I was talking about was basically, see, I totally agree with you. Basically, it's two different discussions because I was going on to the discussion of everything should be perfect, right? But that's because if you go back to in time when what humans weren't around, everything was perfect. They were able to go wherever part of the world you went, that plant would grow really well there. It would nourish itself. But now what's happening is that plants are from all over the place in one yard, and they're not used. They're not used to being in this kind of environment. So we have to learn how to help them to get to plants. And one of the best way is through accumulator plants. Let me give you a quick list of some of these really cool accumulator plants.
Please.
I don't know how to pronounce it. Amaranth. Amaranth, amaranth.
Yeah, so I know Lily could pronounce it, but
Okay.
amaranth, I think it's
Here's an easy
amaranth.
one. Apple tree.
Okay,
Okay, apple tree, birch tree, borage. Now, a lot of these are medicinal plants, by the way. Borage.
medicinal plants for the soil.
Yeah, yeah. Chicory. You ever had chicory coffee? It's amazing. Chicory is rich in
Yeah,
iron, calcium. All of these, by the way, all of these are heavy duty calcium deliverers. They're super hyper plant, but so there's chickweed, borage, comfrey, and these are all plants that I'm planting in the back, by the way, in my yard because
cool.
gophers don't eat them,
Mm,
right? And they provide really good deep roots and they help the soil. Dandelion, I planted a billion dandelions and none of them came up. And I'm going, what the heck? They come up as weeds, but not when I want them to grow. So I have to talk to them. I say, you guys are supposed to be weeds. You want me to just throw them around? That's what I did. I just threw them everywhere. Fine, let's see what happens. So I'm going to do it again. So there's horsetail. Horsetail is absolutely amazing. There's lamb's quarters, a maple tree. A maple tree it's a whole different. This is if you ever had you've had maple, right? Maple syrup.
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maple syrup is one of the best food for human beings or animals ever invented on the planet, and it has a 90 something trace minerals in it. It
But
pulls up.
only if you're getting the you know darkest grade. It used to be
Yeah,
grade
yeah, they're
3,
different
now it's
grades.
very dark. If you just get table maple syrup, it's been processed and all that good stuff.
No,
It's been
no,
stripped out of it.
yeah, yeah. I also take moringa. It's a really cool herb, so I want to grow that. But these are, and then mulberries, and nettles. Nettles are absolutely amazing. They're
Yep.
very similar to the plants I was talking about, the mustard. They're
Yeah.
and these things are high. This one's high in vitamin C, high in vitamin D and E, and it's interesting. You can look it up on your phone. You'll say, tell me about mulberries, and it'll tell you right
Yep.
what it's rich in. And there's sorrel and yarrow, and there are a few of them that's missing here because oregano. All the herbs are very, very good to plant. All the herbs, all the mints. Where you have a peppermint, spearmint. All of these are very. They'll grow like crazy, and they pull up all types of bacteria and biology from the soil. And you can make teas from. You make it. I tell people make teas twice: one for yourself and one for the plants.
Yeah,
Do
I
that.
agree with that 100%, Andy.
Do it as a spray. Coffee should be up in here. Coffee is a massive, and of course, marijuana is a massive. They're like basically weeds. If you let them grow, they'll grow like crazy. Sunflowers also too. It's exactly right. Sunflowers and they're so easy to grow, and
Yeah.
that's why the sunflower seeds are one of the best things we can eat. That's why animals like sunflower seeds. It's rich in all the type of minerals and different type of biological things that we love we need to grow. Protein provides protein, and so these are some of the lists that I have here on that I just looked up on the internet. It was kind of interesting. But again, any medicinal plants will do wonders. Another one is nasturtium. Nasturtium, a lot of people think is a weed, but basically it's a accumulator. Those little flowers and the leaves are rich. And if you have it analyzed, you could. Because the way if you analyze it, you would know exactly what the soil is deficient in.
Yes.
In this area. That's one of the first plants I learned to look for, because I would say, okay, there's iron missing because that plant is rich in iron.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I've taken it because I want iron. I want the iron and the plant and the way that the plant converts it to humans. That's why you eat it. See, when you can eat these things. Like I eat nasturtium, I eat the leaves, I eat the flowers. My body breaks it down. It's one of those things.
You hope you have the right biology that's breaking it down.
It's blackstrap molasses on sulfur, right?
Yeah, she's just comparing it to the maple syrup. The dark grade is the one you want, just like in the molasses. You don't want the black strap because it's got the minerals in it. If it's been processed, that's it. That's one of our biggest problems, Andy, is all these things get processed. Our food doesn't have the same, stuff in it. Like that apple tree, it used to be, an apple a day to keep the doctor away.
Now you need a whole tree in there.
Well, no, you got to eat 20 or 30 compared to like in the 100 years ago. So that plant used to accumulate all those minerals and components into that apple, and now it's not getting that anymore. And that's because we've killed the biology that was bringing those materials to the plant for that apple to be created. But we can just look at that in itself going like, what the hell are we doing? That simple apple used to be full of all these different components, and now it's not there anymore. So why not? It's the biology isn't there, to grab those, break that component out of the soil structure. And of course, we're so low on organic material, in our planting areas now. Like even my yard, I switched to a mulching mower so that I could start building up organic material on my soil again, because it's just over the years it's not there anymore. And to have that health, I need that organic material.
I hear you cut your grass in your underwear.
Well, actually, I try not to, but Lily told me if I do that again, they're going to come and take me away. And I'm going, honey, as long as you come and take me away, I'm happy.
So one of the things interesting about accumulators, they also accumulate biology. They also attract certain types of biologies to them. So that's why it's also very good to have it in your property, because you're also attracting that specific biology that plant brings along with it, because it's the biology, like you said, that makes a difference to that plant and allows it to accumulate. So the root system there'll be a certain area around that root system where the biology will grow, and that's what so it's one thing you can learn how to use that. So when you have plants, that's why you do. So companion planting is very interesting too, because you get immediate. There are certain things you get immediate results. I learned to use garlic. Garlic is an accumulator plant, but it's a systemic. And so if you were to plant garlic under the base of a apple plant, you will taste the garlic in the apple.
Mm-hmm.
So that tells you right off the bat there's an exchange between the garlic and the apple. You don't see it, but there's a garlic taste in the plant. Same thing with the tomato. You put a garlic in the tomato. That's why they're good companion plants, because the garlic, a worm will come and bite a tomato and go, "Ooh, what is this?" Right? No, this is not right. This is not right.
I think that's Andy going, I like this garlic in here.
Yeah. I discovered that really early. So when I read the Organic Gardening Magazine Companion Planting, they said, plant some garlic with your tomato plants. I said, cool. I did that. And then when the tomatoes grew and I took a bite, I'm going, maybe it's just because the garlic is growing near it. I smell the garlic. Maybe I'm smelling the garlic. So I'll go in the house and my mom would say, what did you sprinkle garlic on this tomato plant? And so even as recently as a few years ago, I planted garlic under apple trees, and the owner came out, bit into the, "Ay, buona mia, I love the garlic and the apple. Oh boy," he was Italian, right? "Oh, buona mia, que bueno." Ay, you can definitely taste the garlic. So that tells you that there is an exchange that you can see and taste, and so in order to do that, the biology has to be functioning between the two. There has to be a biological exchange going on between the two, and that's very cool. Because that tells you that there is an exchange going on. Plants are not separate from each other, and even on a property, if you grow them on the same property, because you can have a 100-acre farm and have all the biology exchange. Yeah. Normally in nature, biology exchange around the world, right? There's a biological exchange around the world. It's not there's no barriers or walls to stop biology from going from one place to the other. That's why Mother Nature is very good at, I call it recycling, but basically what it is taking the biology and spreading it out. Yeah. So volcano has its own biology. The ocean, you have its own special biology, right?
Yeah.
Air has biology. Forest has its own biology, but they all blend together with each other. They have a point where they meet, and the biology transfers. It transfers data, transfers information, right? And not just the minerals, but it transfers a lot. That's why people say, how do trees communicate? For example, it's a biological communication.
Well, and let me just bring up this here.
Yeah, you're looking funny again. You got that blank look in your face.
Yeah, I got that funny look. I'm focused over here. So this is the Winnegotsky column, ecology in a bottle. Is this the one that start interactive? That's what I'm looking for. So this actually literally shows the oxide and the antioxide and the sub oxide. So basically anaerobic and aerobic biology. These are the different biologies needed in a properly built and alive soil system. If you don't have, or if you're missing one of these, then you're missing what needs to be in that soil. That's where, each plant is going to need different things, for their genetic makeup for that cell of that leaf. And some of that stuff, those components, are coming from aerobic biology, some from anaerobic or deeper biology in the soil. And that deeper biology, which is down here, how does it get to the biology that's up here that loves the oxygen? Well, that mid-level biology is moving the stuff up and down. So what you're saying, is, your forest is going to be more fungally developed biology that exists. And yeah, if we look at it in reality, our whole planet was interconnected. Like, say, we'll just use North America as our example. Everything was interconnected in 500 years ago. There wasn't a difference of non-life areas, other than your deserts, but all the biology could communicate with each other. They could transfer,
They have to. They have to. They have to. There's no way you can have biology here next to each other and not communicate each other. They have to physically and in so many different ways. They have to on the whole planet. There are no boundaries between biologies.
No, they communicate, just like the understanding of everything is communicating with everything else. Like the garlic's communicating with that tomato to help change the flavor of that tomato. But it used to be everything was communicating. I look at our planet, guys, and this might be a little bit crazy and out there, but
all right.
A neural network where everything's communicating like the supercomputer,
right?
And the biology was actually is what's telling the supercomputer what's there. It's the different programs, accessing information and feeding back. We've killed so much of that network of communication. That's why our soils are struggling to stay alive, and we're struggling now to stay alive. Our planet's struggling to stay healthy because the information is not there. The communication is not there anymore.
It's like the internet. Sharing. It's like the internet.
Yes,
it's a basic internet, and it mirrors nature, Mother Nature. See, when we created the internet, we invented it. We just used what Mother Nature built for us, because Mother Nature built the best internet there is. We can communicate with any part of this planet, any insect, any bird, any tree, any living organisms, and we have pretty much destroyed it to a certain point that there's not as much communication going on around the world between plants and between biospheres, between different biologies. We tend to start putting up border. We did when we put up fence and we stop animals from trafficking from one place to the other place, and we set up a barrier that puts a between the types of biology that you normally get. Because in the good old days, animals roamed all over the place, and they were spreading biology everywhere. And now you're lucky if they should stay in one particular part of their little country. They're not allowed to go anywhere. Birds, there used to be trillions of birds would spread the biology around. So that's what's going on now. We're no longer able to communicate via our soil internet.
Well, and it used to be, you know, when the buffalo would go through a river or a creek, they would bring up aquatic biology on their bodies and spread it out as well, because that's the anaerobic biology is your aquatic biology, because it doesn't need the oxygen to survive. And it used to be moved all over the place. Like they were saying for decades now that, you know, the Sahara sands out of the African desert was coming over and feeding the rainforest in the Amazon.
Yeah.
But now they're realizing it's as much the biology blowing over as the building blocks. People, you know, and you said it, in the air itself, it's full of biology.
That's the way it is.
Does move around the world.
But try to find some biology in the air in downtown LA or downtown New York or anywhere, any city.
Lots of carbon. Yeah.
You know, but you're not going to find the same biology that you find in the forest. You know, and if you take a plant from the forest and put it in the middle of the city, the forest, the plant will die, even if you have it in a container, because it doesn't have all the biological systems that on the leaves. You know, that's one reason why I like foliar spraying, because I'm constantly spraying biology on the leaves. And unfortunately, they tend to die rapidly, not 100%, because the environment is pretty much toxic. The water is toxic. Everything's very, very super toxic nowadays, which means toxic relates to killing the biology off.
Well, and that's the thing. It's the herbicides, the pesticides, you know, is stripping the biology out, making it weaker and weaker. And like when I started talking to Leighton years ago about the predator prey, you know, and you have to have, you know, enough of your prey species for the predators to survive. And if you want to, you know, in a soil structure, if you don't have that lower bacterial, you know, or the anaerobic biology that's deeper down, you can't have the progression of species. You'll never have a worm in your soil if you don't have what's going to feed the worm and keep it alive.
Right.
You're never going to get there.
Right. Exactly right. And nowadays it's gotten to the point where we pretty much are starting to live in a sterile environment.
Yes, very much so. And that's why our food is almost sterile and not good for us anymore.
Exactly. It doesn't have the biology. So we are, unfortunately, one big biology. In Star Trek, we say bags of water.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You know, so we're basically one biology in a Ziploc bag. You know, and we have developed ways to get that more, the exchange, we call it eating, right? We get it in our system. We eat that, we also get, besides eating, we get a variety of other things. That's why it's good to walk barefooted, for example. It's also good to breathe. It's good to listen to the energy. So there's a lot of other things that we are still exchanging, but unfortunately, they too are changing to a radical point that they're not the way it was, let's say, 100 years ago, or even 1,000 years ago, or 10,000 years ago. I can't imagine how the Earth was 10,000 years ago.
Well, there was a hell of a lot more biology out there, you know, feeding the system. But it's like what you are talking about, Andy, for, you know, the cover crops. We can use those cover crops, you know, to put not only the biology but the components back in. Is that, say, like,
that's why you do it.
Everybody uses comfrey as a cover crop, but it draws certain materials up, and you put that back into the soil to feed that next generation. So that's where, you know, we're talking, find out what dynamic accumulator plants are and what they have in them. And a lot of that you can find out simply by looking at the herbal medicine guides, you know, the old plant doctors and your apothecary, you know, why did they use stinging nettle? Because it had these components. So if you find your soil is lacking in these components, grow that plant for, you know, a few months, put it back in the soil, whether it's chop and drop or whether, you know, however you want to do it, crimp it, you know, etc. But it's that components drawn up specifically for those plants that make them medically great for us to consume. It's medically great for our soil and the biology in our soil to consume because it's broken out of the sand silt clay. What's easier to eat, Andy? A raw cucumber or a pickle that's already been processed and broken down in the jar and has that extra flavor? You know, it's better for your body if it's already been pre-digested.
I don't know. I don't know, but I do. I want to answer Farmer Cheryl's
Cheryl?
question. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
So, I grew up in New York City. Okay, so uh, uh, I don't know about. Do they have mandatory composting in New York City?
I have no idea. I've never been in New York City, but I know most cities nowadays do have, you know, the compost bins where, you know, the green bin where they have to throw in the organic material. I know Vancouver, Canada, you can't even put anything in bags unless, you know, it's a
We have that
paper
over
bag.
here too. We have that over here too. So when I lived in an apartment, what I wanted to do is to garden. So I made a deal with the owners. I went up on the roof and I started doing raised beds on the roof.
Yeah.
And it turns out to be a kind of a movement because a lot of people started doing raised beds on their roof. And
Yeah.
so, and then, but the compost was another story because when I was only like 13, 14. So it's like compost. What are you talking about? And when you buy stuff in those days, you just threw away the food. You know, it just went into the trash.
Yeah.
And so I got a tumbler,
Mm-hmm.
little tumbler, and I put a rock in it, and I would throw the food in there, turn it around, and it would tumble. And I would try to buy. See, it's hard to go to a nursery. Where are nursery stores? And I don't remember ever seeing a nursery store in New York City. I don't remember that. It's not. It doesn't fit in my brain. I'm thinking about where did I get soil? There must be some place in New York City you can buy bags of soil or something. I don't know. How about you, Cheryl? Do you buy soil or compost in New York City?
Well,
And
I think let me try this as we'll wait for her to answer your question, Andy. For me, I would Cheryl, I would look at a worm bin, bokashi, something like that. So that would be the type of composting. Then, if you're doing that and you don't have a use for that product, then you know if it's okay if you're growing something and you can use that, you know, but if you're creating it and you can give it out to somebody that is growing herbs or whatever, or you know, you got a friend that has a yard that's outside of that apartment and you can share your bounty with them. The worm bin, I personally love that.
I
The
was going to say that, you know,
coffee.
you didn't let me finish because I was going to because I was going to say
Okay.
that's the easiest thing to do is to do a little worm farming. You can
Yeah.
get these tiny little worm bins, little trays, very very small. A lot of them are meant for indoors, you know, and
Yep.
you can compost everything through there. You have a little bit of of this worm product coming out to your garden. That's the easiest way to do that, and you can actually feed your kitchen waste to that, and you can make it as big as you need to.
Mm-hmm.
You can nowadays you go look on the internet. They're selling so many different varieties of worm bins. They're
Yeah.
like little drawers. One lady bought a cabinet with drawers and turned it into a
Yeah.
worm bin. You know, right? Open the drawer, feed the worms, put it back in again. You know, got the liquid out, put the little pan underneath it so it drained.
Yeah.
When I did my raised beds, I made pans underneath the bed so it would drain to a corner. I was getting a liquid from that. I don't remember too much about worms in those days. So otherwise, I would have done a worm bin. I would have known it because I don't remember doing a worm bin. I didn't remember. I don't remember dealing with worms until I was even in the sixth grade. I didn't deal with worms. I didn't start dealing with worms until I got out of the service in 1970. So,
Okay.
you know,
So
but,
they just were in the soil, Andy,
There
or
were there was something that was always in the store. I didn't in my backyard. The worms were there because whatever it is what I was doing, I had worms. They were always part of the soil. I always remember having a hard time digging in to kill them. You know,
yeah.
in my apartment, I don't remember doing anything with worms. All I remember is doing the raised bed, putting soil in there, growing stuff. I don't remember anything of what I was doing in terms of what was I feeding it, how was I, what was I doing. But that's the ideal scenario: is you get some worms and you feed the worms. You can give them some coffee. You can have two worm bins, one for your composting, which is a little different than one that you get to make a liquid out of that you can use on your plants.
Mm-hmm.
And you end up with this really wonderful worm compost that you eventually end up, and you could do that. So that's the easiest, simplest way, Farmer Cheryl, is
Yeah.
to do a little worm bin. And if you have an apartment, you can probably do it right underneath your kitchen sink or in a closet. You have a little closet, they have worm bins that go up, like they're tall, so you can have a series of them, or you only need a couple of them. It depends how much food and how much you want to grow. Because if you need more, you can have. That's what's fun about it. You can go up, right? And then make
Yeah.
them now where plug them into water. Make sure it's filtered water. It circulates water, so the water comes out. You have this liquid that you can then use on your plants. So I hope that answers your question because that. Ken and I both agree the little worm bin is exactly what you need. I remember reading one where the lady had a worm bin underneath her sink. She came home one night, opened the kitchen door with worms all over the floor. I don't know what happened, but they had escaped. They had covered the whole floor with all these worms. So I think
Was
maybe
too much water or not enough water?
but she did something to make him come out of that bin and start crawling around looking for something. So you
Well,
just
if
have
you,
to.
Andy, if you look at after it rains and you have property
They're
that has
there.
worms, they come up out of the soil because they breathe through their skins, and that water they can't breathe. So a lot of and like I've done a lot of studying on different worm ways to grow worms, whether it's commercial scale or under the sink. There's a lot of different videos out there where you can
Different
learn,
levels.
and that was one of the big things is that moisture content. If
Yeah.
it's too moist, they can't breathe, they're going
They
to get
die.
out. If
Too
it's
dry,
too
they die.
dry, the same thing. I need water, I need a drink, I can't
Right,
survive
right.
without
Just
liquids,
make
right?
sure you have a water filter to filter out the. You don't want the city water that will kill the worms. Just
And
make
we
sure
actually had a
that.
water guy on yesterday.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. For what? What was it? What was he? What company was it? Was he on here
It's
before?
no, it's a new gentleman in Northwest. He's out of Washington. And we talked a lot about water, different things that we can look at for water filtration. But the biggest one again is carbon. The carbon is going to take chloramine, so not just the chlorine, but the chloramine out of the water as well. So you can
Carbon
actually,
filter.
yeah, a straight carbon filter. And I actually got him in touch with Kelpie Wilson, a biochar expert, and I got those two communicating now. And I think Super Nessa, our friend from Ontario who's doing
Yeah,
the
yeah.
tree sap, I think he's going to send some tree sap to be tested. But yeah, like water is so important for us and our plants. And you want to be for your worms. You definitely, if you're going to be using, putting water in to try to get more leachate out or more of that liquid out, you don't want to use anything but purified water with no chemicals, because you got chemicals, it's going to kill your worms, and you're going
Right.
to have to buy more worms and start all over again.
I learned that the hard way when first started doing worms. I basically bought a shower filter, so it wasn't really filtering out these chemicals. So I see Martha Stewart and Baron Trump, composting in New York City. That's right, and that's a really good way to go. Everybody should do that. That would reduces the waste. Just remember, you want to do organic food, because if you eat junk food and you try to give the junk food to the worms, they will die also. And remember, the worms have to get the nutrition from some place, and so if the nutrition is not in the food, they're not going to get it. So you don't expect the worm, if you give the worms junk that's chemically grown and nutritionally deficient, the worms are not going to magically make the minerals appear, because there's nothing for them to take out. So when you feed them your vegetables, make sure they're organically grown, grown properly. Hopefully they would have minerals in them, right? That's one of the biggest difference between organically grown coffee and chemically grown coffee, besides the chemicals, is that there's no nutrition in the chemically grown coffee. There's no iron, no mineral, nothing. But in organically grown coffee, the worms would go through that. Oh, iron, calcium, magnesium. Oh, wow. See, and they convert it, and then that's the beginning of it. Because then from there, you just have to feed it to your soil biology, and let the soil biology transfer it to the plants.
Well, and remember that the worm isn't eating, calcium, magnesium. It's not eating the rock dust. That's why we don't add rock dust to a worm bin. It's actually eating the bacteria that's breaking down, whatever, like say your banana peel. It's that bacteria that's breaking down the banana peel that a worm actually consumes and runs through their stomach. So you really have to be, if you're going with the organic route, fantastic. If not, wash everything, wash that apple peel if you're putting apple peels in it, because, all that stuff has been sprayed. So keep those types of things in mind, especially in a cityscape where you're not getting, or you don't have access to fresh farm food generally, that you do want to cleanse a lot of stuff.
Your worms will die. That's what will happen after a while. You go,
exactly.
Why are my worms dying? Right. Yeah, this
like
guy
too much coffee.
This guy wrote a whole article about why coffee is very bad for worms.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't want to say anything, because nowhere on there did he just differentiate between organically grown coffee and chemically grown coffee. The chemically grown coffee will kill your worms. I've been giving coffee grinds to my worms almost forever, and they literally, I can tie in a ball and they won't die. It'll be a ball of these worms. And I can give them coffee that I buy in the store, and they will not survive that.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, a lot of people don't understand that just the makeup of coffee, the cell structure, you need to actually add, I believe it's more carbon in, because you're putting things out of balance. That's why, we always tell people, the balance is really important. It's the biodiversity. Too much of one thing makes things bad. Too much, if Andy, if you eat too much, Italian sausages,
buona vita.
You're going to turn into an Italiano. Okay? But if you eat a little bit of the Italian sausage, a little bit of the Greek sausage, you get more balance in your body.
So listen. So when you're doing the worms thing, you don't just want to feed it food. You also want to feed it, like you said, carbon. So they like newspapers. They'll like cardboard. They'll like all of these different things. Basic carbon. Like you can take, if you have a tree with leaves, you can take the leaves, get the carbon. They need that as well, because you just can't have soil without any carbon in it. So that's
what's biology made out of?
Carbon.
All these different components and carbon. If it doesn't have the carbon, it doesn't exist.
That's the foundation. The basis. What's the foundation is the core of everything else that grows on it. That's why I add biochar to my worm farm also.
Yeah.
So you want to have, you want to think about, you have a whole process. You can't just give it one thing. You want to give it a blend of things. That's the way Mother Nature works. If you can get a hold of some type of animal manure, it's hard to do in New York City, other than dogs. So you may have to buy. So I remember in Florida, I used to buy bat guano, right? I used to get Peruvian bird guano. You can still order stuff through the mail, but I did, and they must be like I think they have a zoo there, a New York Zoo.
Yep.
So that's what you do. You go to the zoo, you say, I have this here worm farm. I want to feed some of my worms, some of your poo poo. And sometimes they'll sell it. They'll give you. They're probably making sudo, which is compost based from this. And that's what you want. You said, you guys make compost? I said, yes. And that's what you want. You take that because they will pigeon poo. Yeah, it's a big poo.
I don't know if I go there, but
Well, you know, he's probably from New York City. The his whole porch is covered with pigeon poo everywhere. You know, so it's fairly common, easy poo to get a hold of. But I think I probably would. I don't think you'll benefit a whole lot having pigeon poo in your worm farm. Maybe you would, because maybe the pigeons eat a lot of different things. But so the process of getting animal manure in your farm is very touchy, because you don't want to get it live. You don't want to go out and get it right.
Yeah, you don't want, you want to be more careful. Like that's where a lot of the guanos, the back guanos, have a lot of things in them that are really detrimental. That's why it doesn't matter, guys, if you're using amendments, whether it's rock dust, etc. Make sure you're wearing a mask, because you don't want to breathe that in.
Now you tell me.
You know, Andy, that's been your excuse for a lot of years, man.
Yeah, you know, I have my brain is full of rock dust.
Well, and that your hair is too. Oh, lack of hair is too. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, it seems to be disappearing. I don't know what's going on, but I'm getting smarter. So, guys, what are we talking about next week? I think I told you already. You forgot.
Yeah, I did. So something.
And something, right? So we'll be here next week doing something again. So, by the way, come to my website. I'm giving away my ebook version of my book. Don't Panic, It's Organic. You can get the ebook version. What is that? Is that your website?
Yeah, that's my website.
Oh, the .ca. I didn't know that. Is that Canada?
That's Canada, man. It's Canada.
Oh, yes, that's so cool.
The lady should be on with Chiropractic is Sexy tomorrow. I haven't checked if she's put it up yet, but watch for that. We should have another program with them tomorrow. Guys, I so much appreciate you guys being here, listening to us natter on. I hope you guys learned a lot. Go to Andy, get his free ebooks, go to his website, sign up for his newsletter. There's so much information, guys. If you have questions, reach out to Andy. Andy, I want to talk about this.
Yeah, and I would happy to cover. I would happy to be covered, because that's what I'm here for, really, is to answer your questions. I tell people I don't do marital problems, but hey, if your husband wants to use the chemicals and you don't, I think we could work something out there. I think we could see your husband, all he wants to do is do the right thing. He wants to get rid of it, makes it work. So he doesn't care what he uses as long as it works, right? So you can say, let's do this, and you'll see how it works. And if it does work, which it will, he'll be happy. You guys will be happy. Save your marriage.
There you go, guys. Hey, guys, we'll talk to you hopefully tomorrow on Chiropractic is Sexy.
Hopefully the